and we have a very special guest here this evening. As you know, we get to meet the head coaches and the personalities at the Monmouth University Athletics Department, some of the senior administrators with the university. But recently, we've had the pleasure of catching up with some very successful alums at Monmouth, and tonight's guest fits into a variety of categories. We're so excited to have on tonight Pat Light, former first-round draft pick of the Boston Red Sox, entrepreneur, bar owner, podcast host, and most recently Monmouth University graduate. Pat, I'm not sure how I should address you, so let me just bring you in. How you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing good, man. It hasn't been that long since I've been talking to you. I mean, I was at Monmouth this past year, but it feels like forever we've had a chance to catch up. So it's happy to be here.
Well, and you've probably seen Pat, our viewers, more than I have recently because of all the great projects that he's working on. We're going to get into all of it here tonight on our 27th episode of Hawk Talk. If you have a question for Pat, whether it's baseball related, as we get into, you'll hear some of the great bars and restaurants that he owns, his podcast, anything and everything is on the table tonight. Please submit it into our Facebook live chat, and I'll make sure to relay that question over to the brand new Monmouth alum in Pat Light. And Pat, let's start there. How about that? You play professional baseball, you start your business life, and you still have time to come back to Monmouth and get your degree. First of all, congratulations. Like I said, and like you said, we saw each other on campus, but I know that was no small feat.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to, anytime you start something like that and then you have to come back to it, like getting back into a school setting, living, I wasn't commuting obviously when I was playing there or when I was going to school there. I was obviously living on campus or I have an off-campus house. Now I'm commuting from Hoboken, I'm waking up at 6 in the morning to drive down to an 8:30 a.m., business law class. It was difficult in the first month and a half, or actually no, first semester and a half. And then obviously the pandemic actually made my life a little bit easier. I didn't have to travel as much, and I could do a lot online. But it was pretty difficult that first semester. And also, I just bought that second bar and was managing it and like operating it. So that was tough to be able to balance full-time student while trying to do a bar in the middle of fall. It was tough.
And if you are a regular subscriber and listener to Pat's podcast, you know that because the most recent episode, I think it dropped yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, and it's a tremendous listen. The Sorry We're Closed podcast. I got to listen to it. So if you heard that, this may be a little bit repetitive, at least in the beginning, but Pat, in that you detailed that time management that no doubt you learned as a student athlete, as a multi-sport athlete when you were in high school, to dedicate your time and energy to many different things. So the fact that you're, like you said, owning, managing, properties and restaurants, you're hosting a podcast, you're going back to school. How crazy was the last few months, obviously, with everything going on?
The last few months have been, honestly, it's the first, I always thought that, it couldn't be worse. I thought I have a lot more free time as far as, not having to be at the bar physically. But when the pandemic hit and still doing school, still doing the online stuff, along with, now I have to pretty much talk to my landlord every day. I usually never talk to the landlord. You just send the rent check, first of the month and you're fine. Now I'm talking to the landlord every day. Now I'm talking to the town, trying to figure out what they're going to try to do for us and help us through this whole thing. It was mayhem. That the first, I worked harder on the bar now than I ever did while we were open, which is kind of crazy to think about with how much fewer is happening at the actual location. It's still just as busy, or if not more so.
And there's been news this week on that front, as we all saw. Governor Murphy just announced that indoor dining can start. And right before Pat and I came on, we were catching up about that. So this conversation tonight is going to go in a variety of ways, and I'm ready for it, and I'm here for it. And it's always a pleasure to catch up with Pat. And really, Pat, there's so many places to start. So let's go back right now to that beginning. And you were a standout as you progressed in your athletic career. Let's go back to the very beginning before all this great news happened and you stepped foot on campus at Monmouth University. One of, if not the highest rated baseball prospect in program history, maybe one of the highest rated athletes ever come out of high school to go to Monmouth University. Let's go way back when. Let's talk about what brought you to Monmouth originally.
Wow. I mean, what's interesting is I always wanted to go as a kid, and any baseball players watching, or I guess pretty much anyone watching, any athlete would know that you pretty much always dream of going to the North Carolinas, the Clemsons, any type of these big schools, and then to have and then you narrow the field with who recruits you, and then you go from there. But Coach Ehalt over at Monmouth he was obviously a phenomenal recruiter. And he made me feel like it wasn't just going to be like I was just some pitcher that was going to be added to a list of pitchers at the Vanderbilts and those UNCs where you're just one of 17 guys that throw 90 or what have you, or have just been drafted. This was going to be an opportunity, and something that I still talk to kids to this day about when they're making college decisions is, especially in baseball. I can't speak for other athletics, but in baseball, you got to go to a place you can play. And if you don't have the ability to play your freshman and sophomore year, and now you're fighting for a job your junior year, you just missed 2 years of being able to get better at the game and be able to get. I mean, if you think back, I still remember this somehow. My freshman year I was 2-6 and 6.12 ERA. That's not great if anyone knows anything about baseball. And then my sophomore year I was 5-5, and then my junior year I was really good then. But it took me those 2 years of progression to get to that first round status and that first round level of baseball. And I think about some of the guys I've seen go to these UNCs and these Vanderbilts, and their baseball careers kind of fizzle out, even though they're great baseball players, because it's just so much competition, and they weren't able to progress the way I was at Monmouth and be able to pitch every weekend. Monmouth was undoubtedly the best, probably the best decision I've ever made in my career.
Was there any choice in your mind? I mean, you were a great basketball player at Christian Brothers Academy. I know, obviously, everyone knows you're a tremendous baseball player, having played in the major leagues. But did you want to play both at maybe one point, or did you make the decision early that baseball was the way to go?
I made the decision early that baseball was the way to go. I knew I was going to the NBA. I'm not. I can shoot the ball a little bit, but I'm 6'5", and I'm not that athletic. So I knew baseball was the way to go. Obviously, it was very hard. It was hard for me to give up basketball. I loved basketball. I played at CBA. That was like, I loved that game. But I knew moving on to baseball, and it definitely ended up being the right decision. All you athletes or student athletes that have played at Monmouth University know that it's a full-time job. You don't have the luxury of these off times. You're playing for baseball, you're playing fall ball, then you get winter lifts, and then you go right into the spring season. And then for me, at least, I was playing summer ball on some collegiate program somewhere else. I didn't have an opportunity to play. I didn't even have the time to do any type of basketball workouts. So it was definitely the right decision. It allowed me to focus in on something that I was trying to make my career. It definitely obviously worked out for me. It was the right move. But it's still to this day, I wish I could have played. When I came back to Monmouth this past year, I was like, maybe I'll throw King Rice a text and be like, hey man, like I'm only 28, I can still do it. But it would have been too much.
6'6" on the mound is imposing. On the basketball court, you fit in with everyone else.
Yeah, you fit in there. I'm one of the shorter guys.
Right, exactly. Pat, what do you attribute the leap that you took at Monmouth to? Like you mentioned, it took some time to figure out the college game, and when you're 18 playing against 21, 22, 23-year-olds, it is a different game. But as you kind of detailed, when you had that breakthrough and you started to see it as a sophomore, obviously glimpses as a freshman, but then that breakthrough as a junior, what do you attribute that to?
Like I said, the progression, being able to pitch, it was so important to be able to go out there and compete and pitch on a weekly basis at the collegiate level. You learn so many things. You don't even know you're learning half the time. You just feel like you're getting beat up out there. But you're learning so many things that I remember going into my junior year, having a whole plethora of knowledge in my head of what didn't work, and I wouldn't do that. I mean, but I had 2 years under my belt of pitching to be able to go to. And then when you get to the professional level, you realize that those lessons are invaluable. Pitching all the time is invaluable because you need those bits of information you're picking up on hitters constantly. In the pro ranks, you face guys for 5-6 years in a row. It's not just a couple years of college or even 1 year of college. You're seeing guys for the better part of a decade. So every at bat against those guys, you're storing more and more knowledge away on how to beat them and how to get better yourself. The pitching freshman and sophomore year is the utmost importance, and I wouldn't have been where I was my junior year without that.
As the questions start to come in for Pat Light, again, we're going to touch on all of the topics tonight: his baseball career, both at Monmouth and in the major leagues, and the great work that he's doing now, and as an entrepreneur, as a podcast host, as a new graduate. If you have a question for Pat, please submit it into our Facebook Live chat, and I'll make sure to relay those questions over to him. And the first one comes in right now, and this question actually goes back even further than where I started our conversation here tonight. And Rich is watching our Hawk Talk here this evening. And Pat, Rich wants to know, who was your favorite teacher at CBA?
I wonder if it's, geez. Honestly, I loved Jeff Billett. He was the basketball coach, because for the sole reason is he was definitely the easiest. He had just stepped into into an algebra role my senior year, and he was my basketball coach. Like, it was as easy as it gets for us. I don't know if he's still teaching, so if this is a CBA teacher, hoping that I say it's him, or if it's someone else. Jeff was awesome. I know I never had Mr. Keene, but if you've ever been any part of CBA, you know the legend of Mr. Keene. But the first one that comes to mind is Jeff. And he was like pretty much my friend. It wasn't even like, it was like the first time I had a teacher that was like a legitimate friend of mine.
And there's the Monmouth tie there. Obviously, anyone that knows the name Jeff Billett is a New Jersey basketball legend. He really is. Played at CBA, spent some time on the bench at Monmouth for a couple NCAA tournaments, and he's still on the sidelines over at Christian Brothers Academy now. And the questions continue to come in, but I got to jump in, Pat. And you have that tremendous junior year at Monmouth. I know not an easy decision to decide to come out and to pursue your professional dreams, but when you find out that you're a first-round draft pick of an organization as prestigious as the Boston Red Sox, what's the feeling? What's the first emotion that comes across?
Oh, I still can picture it to this day. Even making my debut in the big leagues for the Red Sox, 4 years later, it's still tough to compete with that day. I remember the day before, I had a few phone calls from some teams and stuff like that. But when the Sox called me, and they called me at pick 32 and told me that we were going to take you at 37. 5 picks there. It's going to be a first rounder, which was more of a goal of mine than anything else, to be a first round draft pick. And then to hear your name by I think it was Dwight Evans that is the guy who said my name that night. It was, everything you've working for. I thought back, if you went to school with me, you probably know the name Danny Avella. He was my college roommate. I went to high school with him. And I remember back at Laurel Hall in Monmouth University, sitting in our dorm room and talking about, what our goals were. And I had all my goals for my career was to be a first round draft pick. I remember, Eddie, how close me and Danny were. And even Danny, Danny's a straight shooter, if you know anything about him too. He just flat out told me that he didn't think it was possible coming from a smaller school like Monmouth, not the Vanderbilts, not the the Texases of the world. And I remember, thinking back immediately on that and being like, screw you, Danny. Like, I did this, I got this. And, Danny was there the next day, partying with me afterwards. But that was one of the best moments of my life. Probably, it's going to be tough to top it throughout my life.
Well, there's been some tremendous moments on and off the field, and we're going to continue focusing on the field as the questions continue to roll in for Pat. And if you have a question for him, again, please submit it into our Facebook Live chat. Being drafted by Boston was the second time, I believe it was just the second time, right? Second time that Pat was drafted out of high school. The Minnesota Twins took him in the 28th round. You made that progression to the first round. So our next question connects these two dots. That was back in 2009. 2009, Monmouth made the NCAA regionals, and they went to Ole Miss, where they picked up a fan who asks our next question. It's Martha Thomas, and Martha's checking in from Oxford, Mississippi here tonight. So, Pat, Martha didn't get to see you pitch because you just missed that NCAA regional, but her question comes in, and she wants to know, what is the best environment that you ever had the opportunity to pitch in?
Oh, hands down, Fenway. Pitching at Fenway, I didn't. There was one game in particular that I didn't actually pitch in, but it was a Red Sox Yankee game at Fenway, and it was in 2016, and I was in the bullpen. But David Ortiz hit a double off the wall to clear the bases and take the lead against the Yankees. Like, that was an unbelievable moment. I don't know if I've ever, I still get chills thinking about it to this day. But then I would later pitch it at Fenway. On a July 2nd game, July 4th weekend, that's huge. Then you had, the Angels in town with Trout and Pujols and all these big names, walking into a sold out crowd at Fenway. It's nerve wracking, but it was an unbelievable experience, and it was almost a career defining moment for me in the sense that I didn't pitch that well that day. If anyone has heard me talk at all about my career post baseball, pretty much everyone knows that Angels story. But if you could pitch at that level, you pretty much could pitch anywhere. And it was that Boston was unbelievable. The only thing that could compare to it was Citi Field in Queens. The Mets were in a playoff hunt when I was pitching for the Twins, and they were pretty rowdy as well. But it was still nothing compared to Fenway.
And I'm sure those moments, the feeling, there's so few people that understand that feeling that you just described. And when people like us hear it, it just, we get goosebumps, even just thinking about that scenario, being in that spot. Who was, maybe there's a few of them, but who were those few players you faced when you looked down from the mound and you thought, I can't believe I'm facing insert here? Who were those guys that stand out to you?
Obviously guys like Trout and Pujols were two big guys. However, I was expecting them coming into the game because I was actually, they got me, warmed up to face them. They wanted me to face those two guys, which in hindsight might have been a poor decision. But, but those guys, but I was expecting the one guy that I always look back on in my career as a guy that was shocking to me a little bit on the mound because I did not realize he was coming up, and was a guy that I looked up to in my career forever, was Miguel Cabrera. When I was pitching for the Twins, he was in Detroit, and he still is in Detroit, but I was rolling through the Tigers lineup, and they had a good lineup. They had BJ Upton there. They had some really good players there. Victor Martinez, and I'm rolling through it like I'm feeling got my swagger going. I'm like, all right, I'm in the leagues, I can do this, and I walk around the mound, grab the ball from the third baseman after striking someone out, and I look back at the mound and I see it's Miguel Cabrera's getting ready to get into the box, and I remember thinking like, this guy might be one of the best. This is one of the best hitters of all time, hands down. Like Triple Crown winner. Like this guy's good, and he's been in the big leagues since I was in the CBA. I think maybe even earlier than that. Like he's got like a 20-year career going here. So I remember he looked like a toddler playing for the Marlins way back when they were still with Dontrelle Willis and all those guys. So I'm facing one of the best hitters of all time. He gave me goosebumps, and he gave me a little bit of a pause before, I ended up being, I faced him 3 times. He was 0 for 3, never got the ball out of the infield on me, but he was a guy that I definitely took pause when I faced him.
We have a question for Pat. Again, please submit it into our Facebook Live chat, as so many of you are doing now. And the next question comes in from Kelly, who's in Belmar tonight. And Kelly, we appreciate you watching our Hawk Talk show here this evening with Pat. And Pat, Kelly's question, I think it's an interesting one. Of all the teams that you played for, all the cities that you got to travel to, do you have a favorite that stands out?
I mean, it's tough to say. And obviously, all the minor league cities are kind of unique in their own way. Obviously, nothing compares to the big league cities. You're talking about the Mecca. If I had to pick a favorite city to play in, it would have been Boston. Boston was, it's a different type of baseball fan up there in Boston. You're a god if you're a Red Sox around there. So it's a very different environment. But if I had to exclude Boston from the whole thing, I'm going to go minor league route instead of just picking the easy big league city. I would say probably either Portland, Maine, or Pawtucket. In Pawtucket, Providence, because Providence is right there. You don't really stay in Pawtucket. But those two cities were fun. I spent a little time in Portland, and it's like a real good seafood. Love seafood. So it's a real cool seafood town. It's very a hipster vibe. Like it's got a bunch of karaoke bars. Like it's a cool place. And then Pawtucket, my best baseball memories are in Pawtucket because those were my best baseball playing days. Coming up, supposedly the next closer for the Boston Red Sox. All that hype was probably some of my most fun baseball. So just naturally that coincides with what the city was for me.
Well, and that answer leads right into our next question that comes in. Lynn is in Jackson tonight, and Lynn is a regular contributor to our Hawk Talk series. We appreciate you watching. And Pat, Lynn wants to know what it was like going through the Red Sox minor league system as you started to detail, and what life is like riding the bus in the minor leagues.
Well, going through the Red Sox organization, it's kind of it's kind of a privileged life when you talk about minor league life. You know, minor league life is not, they don't get treated all that well. You know, it's not, you know, you're not living the glamorous life. You know, I remember when you get drafted, they tell you to be prepare to disappear for 4 years because you're just kind of gone and you're in these random cities all around the country and you're playing baseball and you come home, you say, well, yeah, I play for the Red Sox, but like in the organization, not really in the big leagues. Like, you know, you have to explain that about 1,000 times. But traveling that minor league life is it's terrible, honestly. It's like you're trekking it, and as a 21 to 25-year-old, you're cool with it. Like you're you know, you're doing it. You know, you're out there, you're pitching. Even when you're struggling, like you're trying to make your dream come true. And then once you get, I always say, when you get past that 25 point, you're kind of like, all right, I want to be in the big leagues now. Like this is when I'm, you know, I'm trying to make my money now, trying to, you know, make my career, you know, get me, you know, firm in the big leagues. And I remember when I was done playing, when I got released by Seattle, I had an opportunity to come back a little bit here towards the end, you know, and get my feet in baseball again. And I just had no interest in that lifestyle anymore. You know, I wasn't a guy that had a lot of big league time that was really good. So, you know, I had to go through the doldrums of the minor leagues again a little bit, and I just wasn't willing to do so. It was too much. It's a lot of great memories, but for a 21 to 25-year-old, not for, you know, a guy pushing 30.
Well, and then as you kind of progress in your, I guess we could say the end of the baseball career, but the beginning of your next chapter in your career, at what point did you kind of understand, and maybe it was while you were playing or right after that, you wanted to be an entrepreneur and get into the world of business? I know that's what you got your degree in, and that's what you studied, but was that during your time towards the end of your baseball career? Was it right after it ended? When did you kind of know what the next phase for Pat Light was going to be?
It's tough to say. I feel like I don't even still know what the next stage for Pat Light is. I know I'm doing stuff, but it doesn't feel like I'm doing anything special. You know, I feel like I'm just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and hoping it works. But I would say right around 25 years old, I'd say. What year was that? 2017, I think. 2017, 2016. I was in the big leagues, but I wasn't really standing, you know, with my feet on the ground in the big leagues. I was still that guy that was kind of going all over the place. So having that mentality of, hey, listen, you know, maybe I need to think about my post playing days. You know, this is the time, you know, I started investing my money a little bit more wisely, and then maybe not spending so much at the bar, and then, you know, now I had become, because of my off seasons in Hoboken, I'd become friends with a few bar owners and guys that were friends of mine. And I remember a couple of them did some great things, and I remember throwing it out to people that if they ever did something, I'd be interested to think of me. And sure enough, you know, 2 months after I was done playing, the guy asked me to do the sushi restaurant, Saku, uptown, and I just jumped at it. So it wasn't a real time I had no clue what I would do post playing. You know, you always think, you know, I'm done. I'm going to take a little time off. I'm going to go back to school and then figure it out while I'm in school. You know, so you think, you know, after you're done playing, you still got a year and a half, maybe 2 years before you even consider what you're going to do post playing. I happened to get lucky with a friend of mine just jumping me into the restaurant business immediately, and then immediately having a little bit of income coming into my life, and then going to Green Rock. It was very fortunate the way it turned out for me.
And we're going to go into more detail, obviously, with that, but we've got another question coming in. And this question is actually a follow-up to the question a couple ago in regard to minor league life, Pat. And the question that comes in, you know, you lived the life of a major leaguer, but as you detailed, you obviously lived the life of a minor leaguer as well. And just your opinion on the minor league system, how you feel, and I know you kind of gave your opinion already a little bit, but how you feel, is it fair indeed to players and to have to subject them to things like the service time restrictions and the roster gymnastics and all of that? I guess, you know, we'll give you the floor for your opinion on the model of minor league baseball.
Me and you would be talking for about 15 hours about my opinions on that. I mean, it's difficult. I understand that there's a balance to everything, and there's no one easy answer to that situation. Minor league guys probably get paid more? You know, I was very fortunate to come out of college with $1 million signing bonus. You know, how many of my friends on my team though got $1,000 signing bonus and a plane ticket? And now I'm going out to the bars in Hoboken in the off season. They're working their jobs. They got to work side jobs to be able just to stay afloat. I think minor league guys could take an advantage. The one thing that I always try to impress upon people when I talk to them about this stuff is that minor leaguers have no representation at the table when it comes to contract, the union negotiations with the owners of Major League Baseball. And so you'll see it constantly. If you have a trained eye for it, you'll see it constantly. The Players Association will throw minor league players under the bus in order to get stuff for big leaguers. And their thought process behind it is that if you make it to the big leagues, you get to reap those benefits. That's great and all, but under 1% of minor leaguers ever reach to play a day in the big leagues. So it's not really fair for a lot of these guys that don't ever make their dream come true. And now, they're playing at 27, they're playing catch up with everyone and trying to start a family, trying to get a job, all of those things. So I don't think it's a fair system. I think them cutting minor league teams, as unfortunate it is for those cities of those teams that are losing, I think they need to do it. I had my brother was a strength coach for the Diamondbacks and the Yankees at certain points, and he was sitting in on those meetings. And he used to tell me that those guys essentially viewed minor league teams as just a place for their first and second rounders to have a team to play on. They weren't even considering most of the guys on that team as even players that were in their system. They were just there so that guys like myself could develop, and that's not fair to do. You should have if you're have that many, how much excess. And again, you have the Brad Brocks of the world who are late round draft picks that end up making it. Those are great stories, but they're not very frequent. And I think dwindling some of these minor league teams, as unfortunate as it may be, I think it helps some of these guys not get such bad starts on the rest of their lives when these organizations aren't going to view them as potential actual Major League Baseball players.
And again, to us, the casual fan, the observer, who doesn't really get to see a lot of that behind the scenes stuff. I know a lot of it kind of came to light over the last couple of months with all of the negotiations going on with Major League Baseball preparing to come back. But to get that first person account, Pat, we appreciate you kind of, peeling that lid back a little bit and kind of showing us. You detailed it a little bit already when you, at that point, decide it's time to step away from baseball, at least as the full-time career, and then the opportunities that were presented to you because of relationships that you built and things like that. You mentioned Saku. If you are a Hoboken person at all and you're near my age, you hear Green Rock and a smile comes to your face because it is one of, those iconic bars that everyone knows. You get off the path, it's right there. As you now take that turn and you become, this entrepreneur, this business owner, I know you have to be aware of so many other things now that goes on, but how has that transition been, right? Going from someone who works for a team for someone who now works for themselves and has people in their employ. How's it going to be the boss?
It's weird. You don't really view yourself as a boss. I'm a pretty, as you know, I'm as laid back as a person as it gets. I don't get mad at pretty much anything. And now to have people that are employed by you, and I remember that first month, man. I ran payroll, so we have like tipped wages here. And I'll tell you a quick story. I did a payroll once, and I only included the person's hourly wage. Which is in the state of New Jersey at this time was I think $2.53 an hour for these servers and bartenders, and they with the tips at Green Rock, Yeti, Green Rock is a very very popular bar. They get tipped very well. Some of these people come away with $600, $700, $800 checks, on a weekly basis, and they were getting checks for like $16 because they were getting only their hourly. I said this whole big story about, it was the payroll company, all this stuff. In reality, I had no clue what I was doing. That first month, I always tell people, was more stressful than anything I ever did in baseball, whether it be pitching in the big leagues with the Red Sox or what have you. That first month, having people rely on you to pay them and to be able sometimes put food on their table, it's a stressful life. And entrepreneur life is not something that is super easy or something to take light. I remember going to Monmouth on Tuesdays. I would do Tuesday full-time student, drive back up to Hoboken, park my truck, take the PATH train into the city, do a live stream with Barstool from 7 to 10:30. Then I get back on the PATH train, go back to Green Rock, stay there from about 11:30 till 2 in the morning trying to figure out how to pay these damn liquor bills and all this other stuff. And then I go home, fall asleep, wake up at 7:30, drive back down to mom to go to school again, and hope that I finish my homework in time. Like it was a mess, and it was crazy. But there's no looking back, I didn't screw up too bad. I realized it's a great way to learn if you can handle the stress of it. But if you can't handle the stress, it will wear you out.
Well, any one of those things you just said would probably give, I would say, the normal person enough stress, whether it was being a boss and having people rely on them, or being a full-time student, or like you said, working with your friends with Barstool. It is unbelievable. And I think there's probably a lot of people that heard that, and after having a Major League Baseball career would have said, you know what, I'm good, and I'm just going to continue something else. What about that process grind kept driving you to, I think the most important accomplishment of all of it was finishing your degree at Monmouth? Was there something in the back of your mind? Was it a friend, a parent? Is it just you and your own personal drive that was pushing you to do that while doing all these other things?
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't say that my mother wasn't pushing me to do this. But one of the things that people might not realize is when you leave school early, part of your contract negotiations is to negotiate that with the team that they would pay your last year of school. And because they're taking you out of school, and I had a great scholarship at Monmouth, thanks to Coach E. Hall. So I didn't want to have to. I wouldn't want to be penalized for having to come play for you guys. So that was part of it. One of the big parts of it was I didn't want to leave money on the table as far as my schooling goes. Once there's a clock that starts a 2-year clock once you're done playing. If you don't start school by then, the money's gone. So obviously I didn't want to leave that on the table. But the other thing is, it felt unfinished. It wasn't. It was a part of my life that I hadn't ever finished or completed, and I like to complete things. I'm an athlete. I'm a competitor. You don't when I'm in the 7th inning of a baseball game down in West Long Branch, I'm pitching against Wagner at home. I don't want to get taken out in the 8th. I want to finish that game. That's my job. That's what I'm there to do. So it was the same thing at Monmouth. As stressful as it may have been in that first 3 or 4 months. I mean, you look back, and if you listen to that last podcast I just did, think back in this past year. I started school. I bought a bar in busy season, which is, we can talk about that for about an hour of how crazy that even stressful life was. And then on top of it, I'd buy a bar for a premium price, and 5 months later, we're in a pandemic, and they shut me down. Now I got to navigate that, which I've never done before in my life. I barely run a bar before in my life, let alone run it during a pandemic. So, it's insane, but I needed to get that job done. And one of the best things about Monmouth University, as far as being able to go back, is I was taking something and implementing it at Green Rock immediately. I was able to learn, actually, instead of being a 20-year-old kid who can't wait to go to the draft house, afterwards. Now it's like I'm in HR, and I'm like, wait a minute, I can't ask that on an application, and you realize, I got 3 things on there that's illegal to ask. I got to go take that off. And all these things you get to implement immediately and make Green Rock, make Saku, make anything else I do in my post-playing career better. It was really invaluable to what I'm doing. I still talk to professors now afterwards to help me through the media stuff I'm doing now. So it was fantastic that I did complete it.
And that is such an interesting story. How, like you said, you're, first of all, getting up that early, driving down, right? Like there'd be a tendency maybe to be like, oh man, this is a long day. But you're in those classes picking up on things that then a couple hours later, you're going to meetings and you're having conversations, and then you're able to implement that. I think what you just did would probably be the best advertisement for someone to study business at Monmouth. I'll make sure that you get credit for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It really is unbelievable, all of these things, and we're just scratching the surface. If you have a question for Pat, again, please submit it into our Facebook Live chat. Our next question actually comes in right in line with where our previous conversation ended, and John is in Eatontown tonight. And John, we appreciate you watching our Hawk Talk. And the question comes in about, Pat, like you said, the pandemic, the situation we find ourselves in. But we hear so much how restaurants and how bars and how businesses that couldn't operate were struggling. You, as you just said, bought a bar in busy season, then a pandemic hits, and now you're ready to come out on the other side of it. How did you indeed navigate these last few months?
Oh man, again something we can talk about forever in how difficult that's been. Um, but unfortunately for Hoboken, anyone that's familiar with New Jersey realizes that Hoboken kind of quiets down in the summer. I have friends that own, my partner owns Red Rock down in Red Bank. He owns Ocean House and Seabright. I have a few friends that own DJs and all these other big time bars. And the big time bar institutions aren't having a problem to surviving. But you talk about a time where we missed the slow season. It was doable for us. We had money. Say we don't typically make a lot of money in the summer anyway, but having those conversations, and I'm not a mean person, but sometimes in the world of business, you kind of have to be a little bit more stern with people, and whether it be my landlord who has helped us greatly, but we had to be a little threatening. We had to be we had some bargaining chips on the table, and we had to use them or in order for they get them to come to the table and negotiate with us, because we can't, our rent over at Green Rock is 15,000 a month. I can't afford that when I'm not opening, and also I'm not using the space. I feel like I shouldn't have to pay it, but that's a whole other story. but doing that and talking to Mayor Bali here in Hoboken and asking for leniency in certain things when we got to the outdoor portion, and trying to, whether or not having my partners wanting to buy certain things for the business, and putting things on hold, not paying certain bills, and then fighting with the company not to get huge interest payments. It's one thing after the other, but every dollar counted so much during that time. It still does. We're talking about going into the fall right now and trying to make the most out of every single day in September and October, because that's that second wave is still possibly looming. Who knows what's happening with the virus, and we got to make sure that if it does come back in December, and for whatever reason they shut the economy down again, we need to be able to survive again. And that's aside from if you're on Twitter, I'm sure you hear constant politics about this virus. That's aside from politics, aside from all that. That stuff I can't control. But whatever happens, happens, and we get shut down again. I have to be able to make this business survive. And I mean, I know of already probably 5 or 6 restaurants that have gone under in Hoboken that no one knows about yet, and that will never be returning. So it was a tough time. It continues to be a tough time, but it seems as though we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. But we're not letting our foot off the gas as far as being able to get better and make sure that we're in a position to be successful, hopefully all the way through 2021.
And like you heard Pat mention a few times, but those 2 establishments up in Hoboken, Saku, which is the sushi restaurant, Green Rock, which is, again, the landmark bar, right by where the Path restaurant is, or excuse me, where the Path train is, and it lets you out right there. And, Pat, how excited, I know it was a patient time, but when the news from the governor's office came this past, early part of the week, really early Monday morning, and I know it's still limited, but like you said, the light at the end of the tunnel, that's a big win for entrepreneurs like yourself. And was there a fist pump? Was it a high five when you heard about indoor dining? What was your first reaction?
Honestly, I was sleeping, and my lovely girlfriend nudged me and told me, "Hey, you got indoor dining," which was great. However, I had just had a staff meeting the day before to go over what we were going to do for outdoor, and I led that meeting with saying, "Hey guys, I have a pretty good inclination. We're going to get indoor dining here soon. So everything that I might say to you in the next hour might be completely irrelevant." So I woke up to my phone going off from every one of my staff members laughing, all the emojis about how everything I said is just out the window now. So it was good. The biggest thing for us, essentially, we could have gone without indoor dining in September and October because we have a decent setup. We've been able to kind of finagle a cool little thing in our parking lot next to us, and all of those, and be able to bring money in through the door. But with that being said, we need that clock to start. The biggest thing was the indoor dining clock. I know Governor Murphy probably has a timetable of however many weeks or so of good numbers in order to get to 50% and then 75 and so forth, and to get that clock started, so that hopefully if we can keep this thing at bay come those cold months when people don't want to sit out in my parking lot anymore, I can have them inside the restaurant, hopefully at a better capacity, in order to be able to pay a tough rent and be able to pay my employees well.
Well, you heard Pat mention Twitter before. We'd be remiss if we didn't direct some Monmouth fans his way at Pat_Light on Twitter and on Instagram. And as if owning a bar and owning a couple of places wasn't busy enough, Pat jumped into this world, into the podcast world, Sorry Wear Clothes podcast. You can follow it on Twitter with just one R in the app, but the Sorry Wear Clothes podcast, it's available wherever you get your podcast. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. It's on YouTube. Pat, did you have a couple of hours in the day that you weren't busy and you just figured, let's give this a shot?
Well, I guess like Eddie, me and you sit down at the bar and have a drink. We'll be talking forever, and I can talk with anyone, the best of them. And I have done some stuff with Barstool. I'm friends with a lot of the guys over there, and I was just doing some stuff, and I wanted to get into the game. I wanted to do something. I wanted to do something because I do enjoy the restaurant life, but it's really something that I don't want to do though my whole life. I would like to have the restaurants be more of a passive income part of my life, and then do something a little bit more, fulfilling for me. So the podcast, being able to talk baseball and being able to talk pretty much just, I have some pretty cool stories along the way of baseball and post baseball, all these different things that I've done. That's why I kept it. Sorry, we're closed, which is the last line Sam Malone says in the song in the show Cheers. Is just because I can go any direction with it. And I want to be able to bring on anyone I can think of, whether it's a Barstool personality, whether it's an ex-teammate of mine, whether it's a new friend of mine like Will Middlebrooks, who was a 2013 World Series champion with the Red Sox, who I didn't know when I was playing for the Sox, but I know my post-playing days. Whoever it may be, I can go so many different directions with it. It's fun. It's something I can get on. I really enjoyed doing it over at Barstool with Jared Carabas and the Section 10 folks, and then Eric Cubs and the Shore Porch guys. It was something I enjoyed. So I figured, I can talk for 30 minutes into a microphone. I'll find the time.
Well, not only that, then with the YouTube edition, now you're on camera too. So I like that. You get to hear it. There's some audio, some video. Where's the fascination, and I know the parallels you could not write between you and the guy you just mentioned, Sam Malone from Cheers, and even on your Apple Podcast page, the description for Sorry We're Closed says it's life after baseball for a modern-day Sam Malone. Were you always a fan of the show? Is it something you picked up later in life? Because, like we said, the parallels, a pitcher for the Red Sox, owning a bar, kind of writes itself. Were you a fan of the show, or did it just kind of happen organically?
I was a fan of the show. In the modern day world of Netflix, you run out of things to watch. I binge watch Friends, which is 8 seasons in like a month. So you end up running out of things to watch. And one of the times I'd heard so many good things about the show Cheers, and I'm not a guy that's going to be biased towards like an old feeling show. So I gave it a shot one off season. I don't remember what off season it was, but it was one of the early ones, maybe 2014. And I was like, oh, he's I didn't know he was a reliever for the Red Sox. That's cool. And then you just watch it, and you end up going through it. And then I was this past summer is when I kind of thought this would be a pretty good, cool little thing. It was originally called the Pat Light Show, which is everyone starts their own podcast, calls it their name in the show because out of the Joe Rogan Show. So everyone just does that, and I was like, well, that's not that cool. I don't want to just call it the Pat Light Show. So I was trying to think of something else, and Cheers kind of just came to me one day, and the comparison, like you said, between me and Ted Dancer and me, Sam Malone, like. Yeah, you couldn't write it, and it's something. I'm still Ted's watching this. I want to bring him on the show. Because I think that is as good, cool of a guest as I could have for this type of show. So, but it's fun. I'm 15 episodes in or something like that now, and the following is growing. So we're going in the right direction.
And again, if you want to check it out, it's available wherever you get your podcast. It's in Apple Podcasts. It's in Spotify. It's on YouTube as well, the Sorry We're Closed podcast. I was just going to say, I think the ultimate goal, you could have major celebrities, major stars on, but with the tie-in with everything, I think if you could get Ted Danson, that would be the ultimate.
Oh, it's not even close. I don't know how. I've already looked into it because obviously I'm going to look into anything. I'm gonna try to finagle anyone I can get on the show. But as of right now, I have no mutual connections with Ted. But I'm gonna find one, Eddie. You know me. I'll find one, and we'll get this guy. Even he might say no to me, but I'm gonna get in touch with him at the very least. I'll find a way.
First round draft pick. You made it to the bigs. You're a bar owner now. I have no doubt you're going to make it happen.
Listen, I appreciate it. You always had faith in me, Eddie.
Episode 15 of the Sorry We're Closed podcast just came out the other day. Pat details in that some of the things we talked about a little bit, but really good information in detail about running a bar during a pandemic and about what it was like to go back to school and be a full-time student. And, Pat, as you kind of, look back and look forward, your career that transitioned from Major League Baseball through college graduate, now doing what you do now. I know I'm going to ask you this, and we could probably go on for 2 hours on just this, but you got so much on your plate. What's next for Pat Light?
Oh man, it's tough to say because I've been such a guy in my life where it kind of just comes out of nowhere. Besides baseball, which I obviously have been playing my whole life, the bar, I'd gone to bars before, but the best thing about Saku that I always tell people is that I had never even tried sushi before we opened the bar. Like I had no inclination to try sushi. I had nothing to do. I just thought the guy was good at building restaurants, so I got on board with that investment. But everything kind of comes so out of left field with me. There's so many different ways I could do it, but the latest baby for me is that media stuff. Is the Sorry We're Closed. It's the learning that game and learning. I'm data mining behind over here. I didn't know how to do data mine. And then I had Professor Boonman over at Monmouth, and Professor Boonman, sat down with me after one of our Zoom conferences this summer, and took me through data mining, and then connected me with a guy from Nike who he knew as a colleague that also helped me through data mining. Now, it's tough, but it's something that's interesting to me. It's being able to build that business. If you ever watch, I always like to watch those documentaries of people building things, building these businesses. Everyone listening to this has probably seen that first picture of Jeff Bezos in that rinky-dink office with the regular sign that says Amazon. Like, being able to take it from there and building it to whatever you end up building it to, I think that process is so cool. I kind of think of it as a video game in the sense that build is the most fun of it all. And trying to get there, and having these restaurants, I'd say probably at the end of my career, I'll probably have maybe 5 to 10 restaurants if I did it the right way, and having them just passively feed the beast of this hopefully media giant at the end of it. I think would be a really cool life to live. But who knows what will happen, but I'm trying.
Well, everyone who ever told someone when they start playing a sport, you can make it to the bigs. Pat did that. Then the next thing of being an entrepreneur and being your own boss did that. And my friend, I got no doubt that whatever the next goal is indeed for you, that you'll meet and exceed it. And I know I speak from all of us at Monmouth when I really want to thank you for coming on tonight. It was a pleasure to catch up, and hopefully either here or on Sorry We're Closed, we get to do it again. Really, Pat, appreciate a couple of minutes, and really wish you the best of luck with Saku, with Green Rock, with the podcast, and everything else that you'll be doing.
I appreciate it. I will miss my days at Monmouth, and you'll have to come up to Hoboken and have a beer with me sometime.
Oh, I'm in.
I knew it would be tough to convince you, Eddie.
That's Pat Light again. Pat, thank you so much for joining us here tonight as we conclude episode number 27 of Hawk Talk. If you missed any of our conversation tonight or any of our previous episodes, they're available on mammothhawks.com, at youtube.com/mammothhawks, and right here in the video tab on the Athletics Facebook page. For our guest tonight, Pat Light, and our entire crew at the Monmouth Digital Network, I'm Eddie Acapinti saying good night.